second session on the topic ECG. Without further delay, I would like to call upon Dr. Molidhar Sharma sir, Professor Emeritus at SDMCA Udupi, to take over the session. Thank you, sir.
Okay, now I think I'm audible.
Yes, sir.
Now we have discussed about certain of the basics of the electrophysiology of the heart. The real reading of the ECG or real knowledge of the ECG starts from now onwards. And one of the most important principles of the ECG is Einthoven's principle or Einthoven's triangle. To understand what's that Einthoven's triangle, we have to have an idea of conduction of the electricity in the body. Now, whenever we speak of electricity and conduction of the electricity in physics in PUC, we have read about that two electrodes, like one positive and one negative, and the current flows in a straight direction. One line, straight line, is the pathway through which the current gets conducted. But in case of a current produced in the core of a volume, the conduction of the electricity is in the form of some waves, electrical waves, circles like. That's what we call as the volume conduction. Now, in case of the body, heart acts as the core of the core area where the electricity is generated, and it passes out to the surface of the body in some circles. Something like comparable to the waves produced in when you throw a water into a still pond, you will have many waves. Now, the important is certain of the basic things which you have to remember is when there is a wave formed along the wave, across the wave, the energy status of the molecules is the same. And of course, the energy status of the molecules in between the waves is different. So because of that difference of the energy status of the waves or molecules, you will have the waves formed, and this way the waves will be reaching to the surface of the body, and because the energy molecules or energy status of the molecules across a line, across this circle, sorry, when I say line, it's not line, it's circle, any point there, because the energy status is same, there will be no potential difference. There will be no current formed or current flown around the same wave as such. But there can be a current formed between two waves, but along one wave, there will be no current formed. And hence, these are called as isoelectric lines. The waves where the electrical status is the same, they are called as the isoelectric lines. Now, the same principle is adopted over to the body by what we call as the Einthoven's principle. Now, Einthoven, and of course, in before Einthoven, it was Waller who invented about these issues. They identified certain specific points over the surface of the body, which will form the points of the isoelectrical lines. As the heart produces the current, and the current moves across the body to the surface, and these three reference points. Now, from Einthoven's principle, it's the three reference points. Waller had identified 4 reference points, and then, of course, in earlier there were many more other scientists who had this kind of perception, and they had identified many reference points. But now, at present, for all practical purposes, we depend upon what Einthoven has proved, that there are 3 reference points, and these reference points are the arm, the right arm, left arm, and the left leg, which are called as the R, L, F, the usual nomenclature given over there. Now, the basic issue is because these 3 reference points form isoelectrical lines, and when you connect all the 3 points together, there will be no current flown across. That's it. That's the basic issue, principle as such. These form a neutral point. When these 3 are connected together, they form a neutral point. But of course, there can be a current flown in across these membranes, across these points, and you can record the current. That's one principle as such. Then there is another issue. The current has to be assessed in different angles over the surface to have a vector analysis. Now, vector analysis, I will come to that later. Now, when we say this lead 1, lead 2, lead 3, now when these 2 points, like the right arm and the left arm are connected together, these 2 lines, it's named as lead 1. And when left arm is connected to the left foot, then it's considered as the lead 3. And when its right arm is connected to the foot, then it's a lead 2 as such. This is convention. Naming that lead 1, lead 2, 3 is convention. When these 3 are connected again, there is another advantage. When lead 1 is there, it's almost parallel to the line of the heart. So if at all you try to bring these 3 lines together, touching across the heart, you will have 3 lines which are connected together, as we see over this in this diagram. See that lead 1, these white lines, they suggest about that lead 1 where the line is parallel to the heart, and lead 2, the line is at a plus 120 degrees to the heart, and lead 3 is at a plus 60 degrees to the heart as such. So we can measure the current when we measure the current between these 2 points. You can measure the current in these directions at a 0 degree, at 120 degrees and 60 degrees. These are the degrees in which the current can be measured when we record the current in lead 1, lead 2, lead 3. So I think the issue is clear. When all the leads are connected together, lead 1, 2, 3 are connected together, there will be 0 potential. But when you connect the leads left arm to the right arm, then you will have a current measured in a direction which is parallel to the position of the heart. When the arm is connected to the foot, then it gives you the idea. Left arm is connected to the foot, it gives a current at 120 degrees, and right is connected to the left foot, then it gives the current at plus 60 degrees. So that's how we get the recording of the current in these directions. Now, but these recording in these 3 directions alone might not be sufficient. So to have that, there is a hexagonal reference point, or what we call as a limb chest leads. In the chest limb leads, what happens is one lead is connected to the foot, whereas our arm, the reference points, whereas the other lead is a neutral point formed by connecting these 3 points together. This occurs automatically in the machine. Now, in the ECG machine, you have these points connected automatically. When you put the lead system and then record, automatically these changes. Earlier in the manual machines, in the older manual machines, we had to change it manually. Now, anyway, the point is there will be a situation where these 3 points are connected together, and hence you will have a 0 potential at one point, and the other point is connected to a reference point of the arm. Now, when it is connected to the left arm, that lead is called as AVL. It records at the record current at minus 30 degree, whereas when it is connected to the right arm, the 0 potential is connected to the right arm, it records the current at 150 degrees, minus 150 degrees, and we call it as AVR lead. And when the neutral point is connected to the foot, it gives the AVF lead, which gives a current at a plus 90 degrees. So when we have current recorded in the conventional lead system would have lead 1, lead 2, lead 3, AVR, AVL, AVF. These are the reference lead systems. You will get the recording at 6 angles from the heart, and these can be drawn in a form of a vector. Now, vector, we will come to that later. And this system is called as a hexagonal reference system because you get the 6 recordings. Now, in addition to this, you have a lead system which we call as the chest leads. More clarification about these leads now. This is exactly what we have already discussed, but a bit more of these details. When the left arm is connected, the right arm is connected to the left arm, you will have the negative current over the right side, positive current over the left side, and hence the current moves in this direction from the right to the left, and particularly during the ventricular systole, the current moves from the right to the left, and hence you will have a more of a positive wave because the current is recorded in the same direction as that of the flow of the current. this gives a positive wave, and hence it gives the recording of the electrical activity of mainly the lateral wall of the heart. Now, it gives more, or the current is reflected, produced from the lateral wall of the heart. It's better seen or maximum seen over the lead 1 asset. Lead 1 is a negative is on the right side, positive is on the left side, and current always flows from negative to the positive because electrons are negative charged, and hence the direction of the current flow is always from right to the left, and because of that, when you record the ECG will show a positive deflection in that side because the current will be flown at that direction. Whereas in the lead 2, it's again where you will have the negative pole on the right arm, whereas the positive pole on the leg. So current flows in a direction from the right arm to the leg asset, and this gives a current flow at 120 degrees in direction, and this suggests more of the area of the inferior wall of the heart. It's the current produced by the inferior wall of the heart. It's reflected more in this direction, and hence it also gives a positive wave in majority of the situations. Now we'll come to that when it will become negative and positive and so on. But in a normal situation, when the heart current is recorded, it gives a positive wave as such. In lead 3, it gives the positive wave is, or the positive pole is on the left arm side, leg side, whereas the negative pole is on the left side, and hence the current flows from the left to the right. Our current is recorded in the direction of the left to the right direction, or at a plus 30 degrees as such, and it gives a different angle. And this also records more of the inferior wall of the heart, and it can be usually positive if the current is more in this direction, but the positivity would be lesser than what we record in the horizontal axis. So that's about the inferior wall and the lead 3. Now it comes to the AVF. With the AVF again, we have discussed that issue. In the AVF, these two leads are connected together, and you'll have a neutral lead, one, and then another lead is over the foot. And when it is done like that, compared to the neutral reference point, which is created by connecting these 3 points together, and then you record it from the foot as such, that becomes a neutral, the AVF, and this records more of current from the inferior wall as such. The current is recorded from the inferior wall. So it's more related to the inferior wall as such. When the AVR is recorded, in that you will be having a reference point of neutral point connecting these two, and the positive charge is from the right arm, and it gives a current mainly of the heart in a direction of at a 30 degrees as such. And this system is often also named as a orphan lead because it doesn't really give a specific area of the heart. Mainly it gives the current flow of the upper part of the heart and does not reveal any single area of the heart as a specific area of the heart. And often it's also called as an orphan lead. That orphan, the word doesn't mean that this is not important. It still is important, but conventionally that name has come up there. Now that's about the chest limb leads. Then comes the chest leads. Now in addition to this, another method of or another convention of recording the current would be having the reference directly from the heart or heart surface as such, or the precordial area. Now when you use this lead system, lead 1 lead or AVR lead systems, the limb leads or chest limb leads, lead 1, lead 2, lead 3 are called as limb leads, and the AVR, AVF are called as chest limb leads. Now with these, one drawback is the current is recorded at a far point, distal point from the origin of the current. Current is produced in the heart, but you record it either from the limb or a reference point from the limb, and hence it may not show the exact intensity of the current. Directions, of course, is the important issue. To have an exact intensity of the current produced, it's better to have a current recorded directly over the precordium. And mainly the responsibility of the chest leads is to assess the intensity of the current produced. And there are again standard reference points. The six chest leads are the conventional, and these six leads are positioned in such a way that the first lead is kept just on the right side of the sternum at fourth intercostal space, whereas the sixth lead is kept at the mid-axillary line at sixth intercostal space. In between these areas can be just adjusted in such a way, and usually the third lead comes at the mid-clavicular line. So you will have mainly the lead fourth. Lead fourth comes at the mid-clavicular line. Lead sixth is the mid-axillary line, and in between you can position the leads. This is how it's done, and these are the positions of the lead from which the current is recorded. The other lead is again A0, neutral. So because you are connecting to the neutral and then recording the current from the surface of the heart at the precordial area, this gives you a better idea about the intensity of the current produced. Moreover, it gives almost a current flow produced from the major area of the heart, starting from the right side, when V1 represents the current more produced on the right side, whereas V6 is the extreme left side. And when we say left and right in the heart, the position of the heart is usually in such a way that the left is more anterior and the right is more posterior. So it gives you idea about the whole circular appearance of the heart as such. Now, the basic law of the electrocardiography is when the dipole current is recorded in the same direction as of its production, it gives a positive. When the same current is in the opposite direction, this gives a negative complex. When we say positive or negative, that doesn't mean that there is a negative current or positive current. It means only that the direction of the current is altered. When the direction of the current is towards the other side, and you are recording from the other opposite side, then it gives a negative deflection. So negative and positive deflections in the ECG do not mean that there is a negative current or positive current. It means simply you are recording in a direction which is just opposite to the direction of the current flow. If you are recording a current flow is in both the directions, then you get a biphasic. So ECG recording will have these three conventional terminology: positive complex, negative complex, biphasic complex. Now when we say these words, they are not to be interpreted exactly at the literary meaning of a positive negative. Instead, it's simply an upward or downward deflection produced according to the direction of the current flown and the direction in which you have recorded. So this is again one of the important issues. Now based upon that, usually you will have a normal ECG where the current is produced at the different phases of the current flow. Now certain of the things we have already referred in the previous session. A P wave is produced due to the current flow in the atrium. QRS complex is produced due to the current flow during the ventricular activation. The T wave is produced due to the repolarization of the ventricles, and this is what we call as normal ECG. So whenever we get a normal ECG, you will have the recordings of limb leads, lead 1, lead 2, lead 3, and then AVR, AVL, AVF 6 recording, plus the 6 chest recordings, V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, V6. Somehow in the image, the limb lead images, it has got cut off when I have put into the slide. This portion, the portion has been cut off. So when we say normal ECG, you will have 3 limb lead recordings, and then the 3 of the chest limb leads recordings, and the 6 of the chest recordings or chest recordings as such, and hence you will always have a Pellew lead system, which is a usual ECG. In the image, somehow that portion has been cut off. Okay, all right, that was an error, technical error. Anyway, that's about what we see in the normal ECG. Now, whenever we see the ECG, now we start from reading of the ECG. The intervals are to be identified. The first of the thing is you will have to identify these waves, and of course, the first of the thing is you will have to confirm whether the ECG is recorded properly or not. A proper recording, qualified proper recording of the ECG should have a uniform baseline. The baseline should not be too much reflected. There should not be too many aberrant waves. See, normal waves, you should be able to identify P, Q, R, S, T waves. Then we consider that the recording is proper. Of course, in addition to that, we have discussed about the other issues, the speed of the conduction, this movement of the paper, and the calibration, that 1 millivolt is equal to 1 centimeter reflection. It should be properly calibrated. So before you read the ECG of any patient, you have to be very sure about these issues. One is it's calibrated properly, and the other issue is about the position of the leads, whether the leads are kept in a proper position or not, whether the leads are interchanged or not. You have seen the ECG machine, the leads are given different colors. Usually they are given different colors so that you will not miss that. Now, if at all you have missed it and the positions are interchanged, then the recording could be of a different pattern. And the third is about the quality of the recording. And in the quality of the recording, aberrations, speed, these have to be considered. Once you have considered that and then consider it as a qualified issue, you will have to identify these reference points, which we have already referred to, P wave, and then the intervals have to be assessed, P interval or PR interval. The usual normal ranges would be P wave is this much, would be 0.08 to 0.10 seconds. 0.08 means 2 of the fine lines of the ECG. That's the limit of the P wave. And whereas the PR interval is 0.12 seconds, that you start from the P point to the R point, it should be 0.12 to 0.20 seconds. In the sense, 3 to maximum 5 lines would be the maximum limit. The QRS is 0.06 to 0.10 seconds. So 0.06, 1.5 to maximum 2.5 lines, thin lines. The QRS complex, the point from Q to S, I think these are clear. And then the ST interval also has to be assessed. In addition to that, you can even have the QTC interval, which is calculated by QT divided by square root of RR, which is not really necessary. This gives the real time taken for the activation of the activation and repolarization of the ventricles. This is usually done by the computer. When you have that computerized recording, this is usually done. Otherwise, practically, to go into that calculation of QT and square root of RR would be practically not possible. So practically, this QT is not done manually. Of course, theoretically, yes, it has to be done. That's the one. Now, once you have considered these issues, the next part is you will have to decide about the heart rate. Now, as we have already discussed earlier, heart rate counted by the palpation of the pulse and heart rate counted by the ECG, that can be different. Now, to calculate the heart rate by the ECG, there are many methods as such, many formulae which are used, lots of them. If you read the books, you will find a lot of them. But the easiest and convenient would be, there are two important. One, based upon the RR interval. And before you count the heart rate, you will have to decide whether the RR intervals are uniform or not. When the RR intervals are uniform, RR interval, gap between the two R waves, is uniform in all cardiac cycles, then we say that the rhythm is normal. If the RR interval is not uniform in all waves, if there is some area different, then we say that there is a arrhythmia. Now, in those ECGs where the rhythm is normal, now this is important, rhythm is normal, the rate is counted by a formula. Either it's the two formulas are there, 300 by RR interval when you count the large sec squares, like that 5 millimeter squares, then 300 by RR interval. If you are calculating the small spaces, these fine lines, then it's the formula is 1500 divided by RR interval. You may adopt any of these. Both of them mean the same. When you say the large square, it's a 5 fine lines, and the small square is 0.04 seconds. And based upon that, this formula is usually adopted. So 300 divided by the large squares or 1500 divided by the small squares. You can, I think, see in this image, you can see these examples like when it's in this image, you can see the large squares of 3 large squares, and in the first one, when the speed is when the large square adopted seen is only one large square, then the rate will be 300. This is hypothetical, 300 beats per minute. Whereas if it is 5 squares, 5 small squares, then 1500 divided by 300 beats per minute. Whereas when you have 5 large squares in between the two R waves, then the beat will be at 60 beats per minute. This is how you may calculate. So that's again another similar example. Now suppose when you calculate this, if there is a fraction, like in this case, when you calculate there is a 27 small squares, then 1500 divided by 27 gives 55.6. Then use the usual arithmetic law. You have to have an average. The beat, this rate would be 56 beats per minute. Or if at all in a large squares, you get a fraction of that, 5.4. That too, at the end, the fraction has to be again reassessed. This is one way of doing this. Another method of recording the heart rate would be you count 9 of R waves, and or you count time taken for 9 beats, 9 of the R waves, and calculate the time taken. The segments have to be calculated, and you have to see like whether how much time it takes for that, and by that also you can calculate as such. So that in this image, 9 beats have taken 10 seconds, and hence the rate would be 9 into 6 beats in 1 minute. This is how it has to be taken as such. Now you can even have a general formula based upon the RR interval. If at all you find it difficult, just you calculate the RR interval in seconds, and then you can even have the calculated amount of the heart rate. QT interval, as I said about the QT interval, the activation time, which would be difficult to calculate manually, you can even have a chart. So this chart also, standard chart also can be used. So if you measure the RR interval in terms of the time, seconds, like 1 segment means 0.0 per seconds. In that, if you calculate, then if one RR interval is 1.5 seconds, then the heart rate will be 40, and the QT interval will be 0.5 seconds. This is how it can be calculated. And anyway, you may adopt this formula also. Now, simply I have given some examples of the same, like when the rhythm being either at a 50 or up to 300, the rate can be enhanced. Exactly the same issues which we have discussed. This is just to keep your eyes conditioned that I have shown this as in the lowest recording. The gap between the two RR waves is just one segment, that 5 lines, and hence the rate becomes 300. Whereas in this case, it's 10 of that, and hence the rate is 50 as such. Now that's true in case of regular rhythms. If at all the patient has a irregular rhythm, then there is another method of calculating the heart rate, and this is done by what we call as the 6 seconds rule. You will have to count the R waves in a duration of 6 seconds. 6 seconds means, see, each of these 5 line, that thicker segment, would be 0.2 seconds. So for 1 second, you will have 5 lines. For 6 seconds, 30 lines. So you will have to identify these areas of 30 segments, calculate the RR waves in that wave, and then the formula is adopted by multiplying it by 10. To give again some example exercise, in this recording, you calculate the number of the RR waves in 6 seconds in the 30 segment lines. It comes to 9. So rate is 9 into 10. Now in this case, actually the rhythm is abnormal. See, RR intervals are not normal. Here the RR interval is longer, and here 2 waves, the RR interval is not normal. Causes for that abnormality, that's a part which we will discuss later. Now this is about the basic ECG recording and reading. So first is rhythm has to be assessed. If the rhythm is abnormal, then you will have to calculate by counting the number of RR waves in a larger strip, and larger strip where you will record the 6 seconds recording and then multiply it by 10. Or similarly, when it is 8 into 10, the pulse rate will be 80. Or when it is 11 into 10 in this ECG, it's 11 RR waves are produced, and 11 R waves are produced, and hence rate will be 110, or 7 into 10, that's 70. Now these are just to make you condition to what how we calculated the rate of the heart asset. So the first is you'll have to confirm whether the rhythm is normal or not. If the rhythm is normal, you may adopt the usual rule of 300 by formula, 300 by RR interval formula, or it can be the 6-second formula, easiest formula as such. Now, there could be, if you read the textbooks, many of the books would have different sets of the formulae. I think all of them at the end conclude the same. There is not much of a huge difference in those concepts. So once you have counted the heart rate, the next part is about deciding about the axis of the current flow. Now, to understand what we mean by the axis of the current flow, we have referred to that issue like the current is recorded in different directions, gives a different these recordings are either positive or negative currents. Based upon that, you will be able to finalize the direction of the current. This is based upon what we study as the vector principle. To give an example, if the recording is of the atrial contractions, the atrial wave is produced, recorded in chest leads. I have given you mainly the chest leads in this example. The current may be positive in 0 axis, in the 0 direction. In 120 degree, it may be negative. And it's 90 degrees, it's again somewhat negative as such. And in the 60 degrees, it's a positive at that level. If you record at the superior area, it's the positive as such. So a current can be negative if you have recorded in the opposite direction. If you have recorded in positive direction, it could be hello, अभी मैं क्लास कर रहा हूँ. आप बॉम्बे पहुँच गए? ठीक. So you record these currents at different directions, and if you theoretically draw a perpendicular line from this, you can even finalize the final current flow. And this finalization of the current flow is what we call as the axis, the mean vector. I think if you remember about what you have studied in physics in PUC, this can be understood easily. Or simply, or very simple description of the vector is any energy can be represented in any direction based upon its intensity and real direction by drawing a perpendicular line over the area. Now, that's the basic principle. Rather, it's the other way. Suppose if you have pushed somebody in one direction, you can calculate the energy required to push that same person in some other direction. So that's all the issue. So if you have pushed him in one direction, and if you have to push him in the opposite direction, you have to pull. The energy should be in the opposite direction. That's all the point when we say the mean vector as such. Now, I think that's the simplest possible explanation of the vector. Now, anyway, the vector has to be calculated. To calculate the vector, you may use a conventional diagram and draw these current recordings. In the ventricular activation or ventricular current recorded, or the ventricular activation current recorded, the current will be flown initially from the AV node across the septum, and then again it moves up towards the ventricular wall, and this gives you the QRS complex. Now the net current produced would be calculated, and if it is now in the lead system, you will get the recording as either the positive direction and then a slightly negative direction in the lead one, and ABR lead you will get it as a positive current. In the ABF lead, it's a negative current. Now, when you get these leads or current seen in different leads, lead 1 it's slightly positive, lead 2 it's more positive, lead 3 is more positive as such. Now, or in the ABR it's negative current. I think this is ideally in a very classical manner. You will have to plot these over a circle representing these intensities of should be like if it is a 3 millimeters, it has to be written as 3. and if it is 1 on the other side, you'll have to draw 1 centimeter as such. So this way you can plot the graph and then even draw perpendicular line, decide about the real direction. This red line represents the real mean vector, and this is how it is done. But to draw these would be practically not possible. When you see the ECG, you do not have a graph paper, but initially you may try with that, a graph paper, and then it could be plotted. So we'll have some easy formulas to decide about the axis deviation as such. Similarly, another way of assessing the axis would be comparing the recording over the right and left leads of the chest lead system. See, current is mainly flown towards left side because the wall of the left ventricle is thicker than the wall of the right ventricle. So the net amount of the current flown in the left ventricle is higher or more than the current produced in the right ventricle because the mass of the muscle is more on the left side. Now, when the current is more towards the left side, usually you'll have more negative recording over the right leads, whereas that's V1, right lead is V1, whereas more positive reflection over the V6 lead, that's the chest lead. So this gradual pattern of a negative to positive also can give you an idea, and characteristically in V3, it will be equally biphasic. This is also one way of identifying this axis. But the axis due to these chest leads could be altered due to positioning, a variation in the position of the heart. Anatomically, we usually consider the position of the heart as the left and right, but in reality, the position of the heart can change significantly from person to person. So the normal rotation, of course, in the heart would be of this position where left is more towards the anterior side. Whereas it could be having a different sorts of the rotation, clockwise or counterclockwise. And because of this, the currents recording over the chest leads, they are not considered primarily for considering the axis shift, because this can occur due to the normal variations. But this can be supportive. So the lead current recorded by the chest leads are considered as supportive to decide about the axis deviation, whereas current produced from the limb leads and chest limb leads are usually considered as the basic for the decision of the axis. Now I'll come to those basic issues next. In the normal range of the axis, the net axis would be minus 30 degrees to 110 when the current is towards the left side, and whether it is in the lower quadrant or slightly in the upper quadrant, then it's considered as normal. When it is more beyond minus 30 degrees, then it's considered as a severe left axis deviation, or when it is beyond 110 degrees, it's considered as the right axis deviation. When it is in between minus 90 and 180 degrees, that's considered as an extreme right deviation. Extreme right deviation is very rare, and extreme pathologies would be produced. So usually the terms used are this way. Now, as I told you, to put a graph and draw a graph would be practically not possible. So there are certain easy formulas. The easy formulas which can be adopted to a great extent accurately would be, if the current is positive in lead and lead AV of both, then it's considered as a normal axis. It can be taken as normal axis. Of course, a few exceptions would be there. Now, when I say this, I have given this formula only as a easy, simple formula with moderate this accuracy. Some errors could occur. When you can even learn this by heart. When lead 1 is positive and lead ABF is negative, that is suggestive of a possible left axis deviation, a shift which is beyond normal. See, normally it's left, but when it is more left, it can be, and that means more than almost nearing to the 90 degrees, more than 30 degrees. When lead 1 is negative and lead AVF is positive, it's a definite sign of a right axis deviation. If both lead 1 as well as lead AVF are negative, then it's called as a extreme. It can be suggestive of the extreme axis. I think either you may prefer a plotting or you may learn this by heart. So the moment you look at the ECG and look at the current produced in these lead systems, you can decide like whether the axis is shifted to the right or left. To highlight the same, to make it easy to remember, instead of giving the formula, I have given you the diagrams. And of course, this is just to make it easy. It's the repetition of the same issue. Instead of giving that formula, it can be, you may remember about this diagram. Have a photograph of the diagram also. It's the same thing, like when the lead 1, when it is a lead 1, lead 2, lead 3, in all the 3 leads, it's slightly more information in this graph. When it is positive, it's a normal axis. And when in a left axis deviation, left axis as such, that which we consider as a physiological variation, you will have lead 1 positive, lead 2 biphasic, and lead 3 is negative. It's considered as a physiological left axis deviation. When you will have an extreme negative current in lead 2 and lead 3, and lead 1 is positive, it's considered as left axis deviation. This also is another way of identifying only on the limb lead systems that whether it's a positive or the negative as such. And when it is the right axis deviation, you will have a negative current in the lead 1 and the lead 2 and lead 3 would be positive. If all the limb leads show negative current, that's an extreme axis deviations. This can also be considered as a whenever this can be considered to decide about the axis deviation. If at all there are biphasic currents in all the 3, it's called as indeterminate, where you will have to depend upon the other factors. So axis also can be decided by comparing the recordings on the lead systems as such. Again, the same issue where I have merged these two together, the limb lead systems as such again, and given in a formula of table. It's the same form of a table which we have discussed as such. So almost the same issue, everything is the same. Only thing is either it may be easy to remember the graph or it may be easy to remember the table, but at times it may have to be learned by heart if at all you do not prefer to have a graph and plot. So if you have a graph and plot, this kind of graph papers are available, and in that graph paper you can plot these recordings and then decide about the axis deviation as such. So whether there is a left axis deviation or not, these kinds of graph papers were available. Now of course not during earlier days, we used to have this kind of graph papers along with the ECG machine, and in that graph paper you could plot the current recording in the lead system and then could have an accurate axis determined as such. But these days the value of this axis assessment has been lost because of the echocardiography, and usually it's not given the equal importance. But a basic idea of an axis assessment is important, though it may not be accurately in terms of the degrees. Now, to highlight on the same issue, with the slide, some more of the usual formulas. Again, the same thing which we have done, where you compare the current in the lead 1, lead 2, and AVF. The current is recorded, and the ultimate current, the vector, final vector, mean vector, is suggestive of the left axis deviation. It's the same. Now, my purpose of showing these different diagrams is to stress upon and to make it easy to remember. Lead 1 positive, lead 2 negative, AVF biphasic or more negative, then it's suggestive of a left axis deviation and it's suggestive of a pathological entity. Again, the same issue, nothing more, just the variations of the same. Lead 1, lead 2, and the lead 3 recordings, the limb lead systems. So you can confirm that there is a left axis deviation. These are certain of the examples of what we have discussed. And my purpose of repeating this example is just to highlight. Now, when the left axis deviation occurs, the causes could be, now about these causes, the other evidences of these pathologies we will discuss in the coming sessions. But you will have to have some fair idea, like when there is a left axis deviation, the causes could be either there could be left anterior blocks, there could be some blocks somewhere which is produced due to MI. To confirm whether it's a block or not, you need some more additional information, which we will discuss in the coming sessions, like when we discuss about the wave patterns. And left ventricular hypertrophy, the most important is the left ventricular hypertrophy is the more important causes. In some cases of bundle branch block also the axis deviation can occur. And in the patients who have the septal defects, particularly atrial septal defects, Due to the endocardial cushion, endocardial becomes thickened as such, or it becomes bony-like, osteum primum, it becomes bone-like, harder. That too can result in the left axis deviation. They are not very important. The quite important is, and then of course WPW syndrome also not so very important. Wolfman syndrome not important. The important is these bundle branch blocks and particularly left bundle branch blocks and ventricular hypertrophy. These are the two important conditions from the practical clinical point of view where the left axis deviation can occur. Similarly, the right axis deviation, again you can use a plot, and then exactly the same way you can plot this. And again, to highlight about the issue, I have shown you another set of diagrams where limb lead 1 shows more negative current, lead 2 is biphasic, lead ABF is more positive. That suggests of the right axis deviation. Again, the similar set of the images. These are all easily available in the internet. Purpose of showing these images repeatedly is to make you more conditioned to that recording. And this is how you can record the right axis. And the deviation, right axis deviation, again, the most important cause would be right ventricular hypertrophy, as well as the blocks. Again, either it could be a fascicular block or bundle branch block. How to decide about it's a bundle block or the hypertrophy, those issues we will be discussing in later period. A right axis deviation can also be normal in some children in pediatric ECG. Pediatric ECG is one small issue which we will consider at the end of all these sessions. We will consider that pediatric ECG where there could be some variations. In some teenagers with a thin body wall, it can be presented with the right axis deviation. Again, it's the same issue. Purpose is to repeat the same. I think it's the same slide which is got repeated, a technical error, where the axis deviation is seen. Right. That's about the axis deviation and assessment of the axis deviation. So when we see a ECG, the thing which you have to confirm or start reading of the ECG would be, the first is you have to qualify that ECG is properly recorded or not. The next is you will have to identify these waves and intervals and confirm whether the rhythm is normal or not. And then you will have to decide about the ray and decide about the axis. So we have come to that level of reading of the ECGs. Next is relating these into the cardiac events and then identifying the pathologies. So we'll conclude today with this. And if there are any questions, I will try to answer, and then we'll stop now. Time is up. There are no questions, so I think we'll conclude. Right?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.